and welcome to Real Life. My name is Stacy.
My name is Joe, and we're friends.
We're so glad you are joining us today. Lots going on in life of the church, but we're specifically today going to talk about next week, which is Mother's Day, and we love celebrating things around here, and we know Mother's Day can be kind of tricky, so we have lots of ways we're going to celebrate, lots of things we're going to do, starting with one of the things we love doing as a church is showing up to partner with other people in our community. So we're inviting you to send in or bring in packages of diapers that are size 2 and smaller for families in need in this community. So thank you already for those of you who have sent them in, and thank you for those that are sending them. We're going to bring them in person here to the church office or here on Sunday morning next week.
Speaking of Mother's Day, on Mother's Day, we're gonna have chocolate covered strawberries for all the services. It's gonna be delicious and great, and I promise I won't take bites out of them ahead of time. But also a special treat for those who are going to show up for the 8 a.m. service. So we wanna encourage you to show up to the 8 a.m. service. Those people will get breakfast burritos. And let me tell you, these are delicious breakfast burritos. They got the hot sauce, you got the green and the red. I'm gonna go pick them up myself, and I promise not to taste them ahead of time either, and I'll wait.
That's right. In church, we love celebrating. We love the way that you invite people in, but we are so thankful for how generous you are. When you go to reallife.la/give, when you scan the QR code when you're here on campus, you are part of significant life change that is happening. So thank you for how generous you are. We're actually going to throw to Pastor Jim, and we'll see you here after that.
Hey Real Life, it's Pastor Jim. We're in a series called Finding Hope, because I need hope. I need hope for my world, which seems like it is always in chaos. I need hope for my country, which seems increasingly tense and polarized. I need hope for my family as I send kids off to college in the next stage of life. And I need hope for myself. I need hope for my own future and the things that I seek and that make life meaningful and joyful. We all need hope, and we live in a world that is often short on hope. We have deep financial hopes that burden us, and hopes for our own futures and our own expectations. And so I want to spend the next few weeks talking about the kinds of hope that are offered in the scriptures, the kind of promises that the scriptures offer us. Remember, God is a God of hope, and there are at least 5 promises of hope that are contained in the scriptures. So we talked last week about God wanting us to have freedom. God is a freedom bringer, and if we hope for freedom from the things that hold us down, God promises us freedom. Today I want to look at God who is the provider, because often we hope that we'll have enough, or that we'll have plenty, and God is the God who wants to provide. So last week we marched with the Israelites out of Egypt into the desert, and today we want to continue to walk with them as they learn that God is the one who gives generously. Open in your Bible to Exodus chapter 16. We're going to start at verse 4. The people have complained to Moses that they don't have food like they did in Egypt. In Egypt, they had barbecues and they had everything they needed. And why didn't you just leave us in Egypt to die where there were at least graves for us to be buried in? And you've dragged us out here in the desert, Moses. So they're complaining that they don't have enough. And here's how the story goes at Exodus chapter 16, verse 4. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the 6th day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. Little detail here. The reason on the 6th day they gather enough for 2 days is because the 7th day is a Sabbath. And on the Sabbath day, you're not supposed to do any work at all. You're supposed to rest and worship. You're not supposed to even prepare food. We're going to talk more about this next week when we talk about the hope that we have for rest. But today, just note that God provided for them exactly what they needed each day, except on the day before the Sabbath, he doubled it because he had expectations for the Sabbath. Now skip down to verse 13. That evening quail came and covered the camp. These birds landed in the camp. And in the morning, there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. In the morning, they had frosted flakes. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" Which in Hebrew is manna. For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person." That's an amount, a measurement. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some gathered little. And when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Not only that, but after the desert, when they entered into the promised land, the land that was given to them, God gave them vineyards that they did not plant for themselves. So God provided for them in the desert when they had nothing. And at the end of the desert, when they entered into the land that was to be their nation, God provided for them a rich nation that was already supplied with all the resources they need. If you flip over to Deuteronomy 6, chapter 10, this is how that story went at the end of their journey through the desert. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then, when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. God's will for his people in the wilderness, in the desert, was to provide for them and to show them that he could provide for them. Not to give them everything they needed when they packed so that they had enough along the journey, but to give them exactly what they needed for each day so that they would live in constant dependence on God. The only break was on the Sabbath, where they could collect enough the day before to have a day of rest. And at the end of their journey, when they enter into their promised land, God says, you're going to have everything when you need when you move into this land. You're not going to have to plant any of it. It's going to be there ready for you. Don't forget who gave it to you. And that's the story of God walking his people through the wilderness. There was a moment where I came to really believe that God could provide anything he wants whenever he wants. It was kind of a weird supernatural experience. There was a day where I was sitting in my living room at night and I was watching a Dodgers game. The Dodgers were in the World Series that year. And I remember the night because it was the night that they broke the record for the longest ever game in the World Series. It just kept going on in overtime. It was inning after inning after inning. And I sat there watching the game and I wasn't all that impassioned about it, but I was up watching it. And I sort of felt this nagging thought in my mind. Often the Holy Spirit speaks this way. It feels like a daydream or just an impression you have in your mind. I had this impression in my mind that I was supposed to clear my calendar for the next morning. So here I am in the evening watching TV, and I have this sort of sense that I'm supposed to clear my calendar for the next morning. And I don't know exactly how to tell you to identify this voice yet, except it feels a little bit like it's not you. It feels like something you wouldn't think yourself. It feels like a bit of a surprise. And I sat there watching the Dodgers game, and I knew I had 2 appointments the next morning that I had scheduled that I was supposed to keep. And I thought, well, I don't know. I guess I could rearrange my calendar. I mean, just in case. What if this really is God saying something and not just my imagination? And so I did. I sent texts to the 2 people I was supposed to meet with the next morning, and I said, hey, can we reschedule it? I've had something come up. Can we reschedule at another time? And I rescheduled it. So now my calendar for the next morning was empty. There was nothing going on, and I couldn't tell you why. I didn't know what I was supposed to free up the calendar for. So I'm watching the Dodgers, and the game is going later and later, and it goes from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. And it gets late in the evening, and I think, well, that was a mistake. I guessed wrong. That wasn't God talking to me. I didn't need to have my calendar cleared for the next day. And close to, I guess it was probably 10 p.m. or later, a friend of mine texted me and said, hey, I need your help tomorrow morning. we have a tour group coming through downtown LA, and they're from China. And I know you speak a little bit of Chinese, and the person who's leading them speaks Chinese well, but only speaks a little bit of English. And we need somebody who kind of speaks a little bit of both, who can go down there, and there's this guidebook that they're going to need you to look at. It's only going to take about 20 minutes, but they're going to need you to search through it in English to help them see what they're looking at. And so if you can drive down to Los Angeles tomorrow morning, just talk to these people for about 20 minutes, we'll pay you $400. And I said, are you kidding? And if it had been any other situation, I would have said, no, this sounds weird. I'm not doing this. But I had this really deep impression. You're supposed to clear your calendar for tomorrow morning. And at close to 10 o'clock at night, I get this message that says, I need you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Sure enough, I went downtown. There was this tour group. They handed me this giant guidebook that was in English. I kind of flipped through it and looked for the things that they wanted and told them, and the guy translated it into Chinese for them and then said, thank you, bye, and paid me $400 for that. And I walked away from that going, that was the weirdest experience I've ever had. I don't know what to make of any of that. Except that I think God wants us to know He really can rain bread down from heaven. He can give us anything He wants to give us anytime He wants to give it. And nothing stops Him from doing it. Not the economy, not our jobs, not our savings. God can provide for us what He wants to provide for us. And a lot of us have hope that we'll have enough, that we'll survive, or better still, that we'll thrive. Maybe not that we'll be filthy rich, but just that we'll be able to do the kinds of things we want to do. And God is a God who gives us hope because He is the God who can provide exactly what He wants us to have. Jesus in His ministry will throw back to the raining down of manna from heaven in the desert, and He'll teach His disciples to pray in Matthew chapter 6, give us this day our daily bread. And daily bread was a familiar term. That wasn't just a casual expression. That didn't just mean give me the food I need to eat today. Daily bread was a reference to manna falling daily in the desert. Because you got to imagine they traveled through the desert for weeks and months and years. They traveled for all this time. And God said, every morning you're going to go out and find just enough bread on the ground for that day. Only take enough for today. It's your daily bread. And so when Jesus says, I want you to pray, give us this day our daily bread, what He's doing is a reference that everyone would have immediately caught. It's like you would understand the reference if I said, may the 4th be with you today. You probably know exactly what I'm talking about if you know anything about American culture. Or if I say, join the dark side, Luke, I am your, you can finish the sentence. Because you know it. It's a reference that everybody would have got. The idea that they should pray for daily bread would have made them think immediately, oh yeah, like in the desert when God provided manna. And what Jesus wanted there was not just for them to pray for their survival. What Jesus wanted to teach them to do was pray, God, teach me to depend on you today. Give me exactly what I need for today. So at the end of the day, I'm thankful. So at the end of the day, I know you're the one I can depend on. Over and over again, Jesus will mirror or reflect back to the bread in the desert. He does it again at the feeding of the 5,000. If you look at John chapter 6, or this is the only miracle that's referenced in all 4 of the Gospels. Jesus has the people sit down in a crowd. He's teaching them. The day gets long. The shadows get longer. People are hungry. And He takes 5 loaves and 2 fish and He distributes them through the crowd, and they feed 5,000 people. And if you've been listening to me before, you've heard me reference the fact that in John 6 it says, then they tried to make Him king by force. He gave them bread and they tried to make Him king by force. Because this is something they had seen Caesar do. Rome ruled over them. And one ancient historian said Rome kept the people under control with bread and circuses. They'd hold big events in their colosseums and in their amphitheaters, gladiator competitions and chariot races, and they'd provide bread for them to live on. In fact, in some of the theaters, the Roman centurions would walk through and throw bread into the audience and say, Caesar provides for you, Caesar provides for you. And here Jesus is on a hill with His open-air amphitheater, and He is working miracles, which is better than a circus. and he provides bread for them. And this is, again, a reference to the fact that God is the one who can provide for us exactly what we need for today. Jesus will re-emphasize and strengthen this message when he says in the Gospel of John, I am the bread of life. What you need in this world, what you need as you are traveling through the wilderness of this life is me. If you read the book Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer, you'll see that Comer says, the reward of following Jesus is Jesus. It's a good book. You should read it. The reward of following Jesus is Jesus. The daily bread that we need is not just the thing we eat. It's a relationship with the one who can provide for us. And Jesus himself says, I am the bread of life. We've seen this happen over again in our lives here at Real Life Church, and you've heard me talk about it if you're a regular participant in the life of Real Life Church. Recently, I shared a story with you about a woman who visited our pantry. And that morning, on the way down to the pantry, I prayed, God, who am I going to pray for today? And again, I felt that voice in my mind say, Carolyn. And I thought, well, this could be my imagination. We'll see. And I got down to the pantry, and the second car that I prayed for, which was the first woman that I prayed for, there was a guy in the first car, and the second car pulled up, and I said, hi, my name is Jim. What's your name? And she said, my name is Carolyn. And I said, oh, God told me I'd be praying for a Carolyn today. And she said, oh, that means so much to me. And then 2 weeks later at our next pantry, she pulled in again. Somebody came running and got me and said, there's a woman out in the parking lot named Carolyn who wants to talk to you. And I said, oh, I remember Carolyn. I'll go talk to her. And I went out and saw Carolyn again. And Carolyn says, do you remember me? I said, yes, I remember. I prayed for you last time. She says, do you remember what you prayed for me? And I said, no, remind me. She said, you prayed for my financial needs. And I said, oh, well, that doesn't surprise me. That's what we're all praying for these days. In this world, in this economy, in this state, we're all praying for our financial needs. That doesn't surprise me a bit. And she said, yeah, but you prayed for me on a Saturday. And 2 days later on Monday, I got a check in the mail that I was not expecting. That was a complete surprise, and it took care of my financial needs. And I just came back to let you know. And we've seen that happen over and over again here at Real Life Church in the life of our congregation. There's 2 or 3 different women who have shared with me about how they were in their retirement years. And suddenly they were in financial need, and their Social Security benefits changed and met their needs right at the moment they were praying for it. One woman told me that she wanted to continue tithing, wanted to continue giving generously. And she prayed that God would provide for her, and she went ahead and gave anyway, not being sure how she was going to pay all of her bills. And then she went to the Social Security office, and they told her there had been an adjustment in her payment, and her payment went up just enough to cover what she had given. I'm not doing a fundraiser here. If you think that's what I'm doing, you can send money to the church down the street instead of our church. I'm just telling you, God is the God who provides. And he doesn't just want us to survive. He wants us to have exactly what we need, to have plenty. It says in the text, those who gathered a lot had exactly what they need. Those who gathered a little had exactly what they need. God took care of them all. And if we put our trust in him, he likes to provide for us. He likes to rain bread from heaven so that we can see that he is good. Now, notice in this, there is a spirituality of rot. If the people in the wilderness gathered more than 1 day's worth, they would wake up the next morning and find that what the extra they had gathered had rotted. If they gathered up more than they needed, it didn't survive. It didn't last. It didn't preserve. And I don't think that's accidental or incidental, because certainly God could have provided bread that lasted a week if he wanted to. He provided for them exactly enough for 1 day. And if they took more than that, it didn't last. And I think that was part of Jesus' way of saying, hey, what I want is a relationship with you. I want a relationship with you where you trust in me and depend on me every day. I want a relationship in which you are growing in maturity and wisdom and in my likeness. And that's what Jesus is really after, that we would be in a relationship with him where we're growing in maturity and in wisdom, where we're continuing to depend on him, and where we're growing in his likeness. Imagine yourself in the place of financial need, and you go to a good, healthy, loving parent and say, hey, I'm in financial need. Can you help me? Not to borrow, I need you to give me money. And the parent provides for you. And you think, oh, good, that's such a relief. And then you find yourself in that situation again. And you go back to your parent and you say, hey, I'm in financial need. Can you take care of me? And the parent does it again. Now think about what that parent wants at that point. That parent wants you to trust them. They want you not to live a life of worry, but to live a life of trust. And they want you to have a relationship with them. They want you to know that they are there for you and they care about you. They probably want you to grow in maturity and wisdom and be a good steward of the resources that they give you, to manage the gifts well. And they probably want you to do it the way that they do it and one day be generous with the people that you care for. If we don't do that, the relationship with the parent rots. It doesn't work. The mistakes that we can make in depending on God's providence is, number one, to treat God like a candy machine that we just go to transactionally. I want stuff, so I'll talk to God when I want stuff, and then when I get the stuff, I'll stop talking to him. And that rots our relationship with God. And Jesus wants a healthy, living, growing relationship with us, not just one in which we run to him where at times where we need something and then disappear after that. Another mistake is to treat God like a candy machine and just keep going back to him so that we can stockpile, not because we need it, just because we want enough to give us a safe reserve so that we don't have to depend on him anymore. But he wants us growing in wisdom and in stewardship, not to be a hyper saver nor an overspender, but somebody who manages our gifts well. Another mistake we can make is failing to imitate the generosity of the Father. When God gives to us, he gives to us so that we might give to others. That begins by tithing, by giving 10% of our income to building the kingdom of heaven on earth. And then we go and care for the poor and those in need. And we do that out of our own resources and our own generosity because we trust God will provide for us. And a final mistake we can make, a final mistake that contributes to a spirituality of rot, is when we try to save up enough to provide for the people we love so that they never have to trust in Jesus themselves. I know some people have in mind, I'm gonna give my kids a fortune so they never have need again. But that robs them of the opportunity of depending on Jesus. And Jesus wants us to depend on him and not just on our savings. So given that we have a God who can rain bread from heaven and who wants us not just to survive, but to thrive. And he wants us to depend on him and to lean on him and to grow in maturity and wisdom and stewardship and in Christ likeness. Given all that, here are some spiritual disciplines that we might practice so as to live into the kind of life that God wants for us. Number one, we have to be a people of prayer. Jesus taught us to pray, give us this day our daily bread. That presumes we're praying every day. We're supposed to pray that prayer again every morning. And that way we enter into a relationship with Jesus in which we are constantly talking to him and communicating with him and listening to him. I spend about an hour in prayer every morning, often sitting in the sanctuary of our church, alone in the dark. And I just start my day talking to Jesus. Two, we got to know the life of Jesus from the scriptures. We have to read what he's already done. We grow in his likeness and in an understanding of him by reading the stories of who he was and what he did and what he said. And we have to spend time every day immersing ourselves in the teachings of the scriptures. Three, it's helpful if we name our motives out loud as concerns our finances. Are we worried about money? Why are we worried? Do we not trust that God will take care of us? Do we think that we're supposed to have a lifetime's worth of savings already? Are we actually in crisis, or are we just remembering a crisis from the past that shapes the way we trust today? It helps to name out loud what our motives actually are so that we can really look at them. And then four, we should all really tithe. Tithing is giving 10% of our income to a house of worship so that God would be honored by our gifts. And again, I'm not fundraising for this church. It doesn't have to be this church. But tithing is still the call on all of us who follow Jesus and want to be like him. He is a God who is generous, and he calls us to be generous and to trust in him. And five, we have to manage well. What God has given me for today is for me to be wise and responsible with, not to throw out the window in excess spending, nor to stockpile and hide under a rock. What Jesus wants is for me to be in a relationship with him where I depend on him every day. And I know that he's trustworthy and he provides for me. And as a consequence, I can grow in wisdom and maturity and in good stewardship. I can become more and more responsible for the things that he gives me. And then as a consequence, I grow in his likeness. I become more and more like him. And I live generously because he has been generous with me. And that is the promise of the scriptures, that we can have hope in a God who provides. So thank God for that. God bless you in your week. I'll see you again next week.
Thank you so much for that message, Pastor Jim.
And thank you for being part of our day today. We are praying for you. We're cheering for you. If we can ever help you, support you, email us, info@reallife.la. Until we see you, have a great week.